Hello, this is Lerone Kuntz, correction officers in the news. I'm here to announce that Captain Rebecca Hillman was found guilty of criminally negligent homicide in the death of inmate Ryan Wilson, who committed suicide. Now, this is a tragedy for her and the family of Ryan Wilson. This should have never happened. There's policies put in place to prevent these types of suicides from happening. Now, when I heard that she testified that she had not got suicide prevention training, I said that's ridiculous, because everybody in correction gets suicide prevention training. If you've been through the academy, when you first come on a job, you get suicide prevention training. And the prosecution was able to produce documents that said that she had suicide prevention training in 2014, 2015, and 2018. And I think that's the case. You may not get it every year, but during the course of your career, you will get suicide prevention training. And if you're a captain, you've definitely had suicide prevention training. For a captain or even an officer to sit on the stand and say that they've never got suicide prevention training is like a fireman telling us that he doesn't know how to work a fire extinguisher, or he doesn't know how to hook up a fire hose to a fire hydrant. It's so basic to correction. Everybody gets suicide prevention training, no doubt. Now, in her case, the inmate announced that he was going to commit suicide. The captain responded to the area, looked into the cell, saw him hanging, thought he was playing, and walked away for 15 minutes. They have all this on video. They showed this to the jury. This is not part of what correction trains correction officers to do. You are not trained to look at a guy that's hanging and walk away. The rules are very simple. If an inmate threatens suicide, contact your supervisor, get him to the clinic so he can be assessed by a professional. Simple. If an inmate is hanging, cut him down, contact the supervisor, get him to the clinic so he can be assessed by a professional. Simple. You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to determine whether he's serious or not. That's not your job. Just cut him down, send him to the clinic. Simple as that. Now, one of the premises that her defense used in her case is that the Department of Correction is dysfunctional. And that is true. From my experience, the department is dysfunctional. But one of the reasons why it's dysfunctional is because people don't want to do what they're supposed to do. And she's a perfect illustration of that. She is supposed to take action when she sees someone committing suicide, and she doesn't. Those types of things are what makes the department dysfunctional. And if you're disgruntled about the dysfunction in the department, as it seems like she was, then don't do the job. Resign. Turn in your shield and find something else to do. Now, let me just talk about suicide prevention in general. Now, as correction officers, we are charged with the care, custody, and control of inmates. Care is number one. You gotta care. You gotta care about the inmates, whether or not they live or whether or not they commit suicide. You have to care about that, and you have to be on top of that, okay? That's part of your job. If you want to be in this profession, then do that. Make sure that the inmates don't commit suicide. And even if you do your very best to prevent a suicide, inmates still find ways to commit suicide. But if that's the case, at least you can say that I did everything in my power to prevent that from happening. Suicide and depression go hand in hand, and depression is very prevalent in jail because an inmate may go to court and they may find out that they are going to have to do 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years when they thought they were going home today. So when an inmate comes back from court, you need to talk to him, you need to assess him, you need to watch him and see if his demeanor has changed. If he looks a little depressed or he doesn't look the same as he did when he went to court that morning, then it's okay to talk to him and say, hey man, how did it go in court today? Did you see the judge? What did they say? Try to enter into a conversation about what's happening with his case. And if you see that he's depressed, or if you think that he may be depressed, you don't have to determine whether he's depressed or not. If you think he may be depressed, you can ask him, are you contemplating committing suicide? Are you thinking about committing suicide? Do you want to, do you think that you might feel like committing suicide? And if he says yes, then send him to the psych. Write up a psych referral, call a supervisor, get him down to the clinic. Simple as that. By you talking to him about suicide is not putting the idea in his head. It's okay to ask him or her, are you thinking about, hurting yourself? Are you thinking about committing suicide? And sometimes they will tell you, yes, I am. And then you take action. Most of the time, an inmate will not tell you that they're going to commit suicide. Okay? Most of the time, an inmate will wait until 3 in the morning when everybody's asleep to commit suicide. If an inmate is determined to commit suicide, he's going to commit suicide. But you want to give him the opportunity to get help. If you know that the inmate is suicidal, all right, sometimes they will assess an inmate and say, yes, he's suicidal. He's on the watch sheet. You have to watch him every half hour or every 15 minutes. If you get a watch sheet like that, make sure that you follow through. Make sure that you watch that inmate every half hour, every 15 minutes. When Jeffrey Epstein was in prison, he was on a watch sheet, and they assigned 2 officers to watch him, and both of the officers fell asleep and he committed suicide. That should never happen. You have to take your job seriously, and you have to be diligent. You have to make those tours. You have to watch the inmate, and even if it says you make your tour every half hour, what I would do, I would make my tour, let the inmate see me watching him, that we've made eye contact, and then walk away and come back 5 minutes later and make eye contact with him again to let him know that you're not going to put me on a time schedule thinking that, oh yeah, he came now and he's got to come back in 30 minutes, so I have 30 minutes to commit suicide. No, you don't. I'm taking this personally. I'm taking this seriously. I'm going to double back on you and make sure that you're not committing suicide on my watch. And even if you do those things, inmates still can commit suicide. I know very good officers that have had to deal with and had to live with the fact that someone on their watch has committed suicide. Now, another thing about suicide I want to say is that don't always expect, like in this case, that an inmate is going to be hanging from the light fixture with a bed sheet around his neck. That's not always going to be the case. Inmates are very creative. So sometimes an inmate may try to commit suicide by tying a bed sheet to the bars on his cell and just lay down on the floor, or lay down and just let the weight of his body tighten the knot and make it slip, so it cuts off the air and the oxygen flow to the brain, and it only takes 3 to 5 minutes for the inmate to die. So don't always think that an inmate is going to be hanging. An inmate can hang by just tying a bed sheet to one side of the bed, tying it around his neck, and then leaning on the other side of the bed until the weight of his body causes that knot to slip and cut off the oxygen to the brain. All right, so an inmate can technically be laying down and be committing suicide. An inmate can tie a sheet onto the bed frame and lay under the bed and commit suicide that way. So don't always think it's going to be like on television where a person is hanging in the middle of the room with a sheet around his neck. It's not going to always be like that. And when you make your tours and your security inspections, especially on the midnight tour when inmates are in their cells, in their beds, make sure that the inmate is breathing. Don't just check that the inmate is in the cell. Don't just count bodies, count live bodies. And the way you do that is that you watch the inmate while he's asleep, and you see whether his chest rises, and you'll see the bed sheets moving up and down because he's breathing. If you don't see that, if he's in a position where you can't see whether or not he's breathing, then you need to make some noise to stir him so you can see whether he's alive or not. You might want to knock on the door with your keys. You might want to say something. And even if he gets upset because you woke him up in the middle of the night at 4 in the morning, it's okay, because your purpose is care, custody, and control. And almost take it personally if an inmate tries to commit suicide. I mean, I would feel like, hey, you're not going to do this to me. You're going to you're not going to do this to me. You may not have anything to live for, but I have something to live for. But in truth, everybody has something to live for. All right. A person may be depressed today, but tomorrow's another day and it's another chance to get it right, and it's another chance to get help to help you cope with what's going on in your life. So everybody deserves the opportunity to get help, and that's what correction officers are supposed to do. If you yourself are feeling depressed, are you feeling suicidal, you can get help. If someone that you love, if you have a child or a spouse or anybody that's in your family that you think may be suicidal, talk to them. And if they need help, get them professional help. You can text 988 and get professional help. You can chat at 988lifeline.org to speak to someone who can help you. There's always tomorrow. There's no reason to take your own life. And I'm just so upset that this incident happened. I'm sorry to see that this captain got convicted and is now facing 4 years in prison for something that could have been avoided. I feel bad for the family that has to cope with their loved one who was a 29-year-old man that was suffering from bipolar disorder, to come to prison to take his own life with people that were aware that he was taking his own life and didn't do what they were supposed to do, did nothing to save him. So for that reason, I'm kind of emotional today. But I just wanted to report to you guys that Rebecca Hillman has been found guilty of criminally negligent homicide and is facing 4 years in prison. So if you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, as always, peace, keep the faith, and stay safe.